When I started implementing question-answer relationship strategies, which I will refer to as QAR, in my classroom, it wasn't too long that I found out how much of a difference it made in terms of my students' reading comprehension skills. Before I go much further, I want to explain what QAR is all about. Essentially, the QAR strategy helps students understand the various types of questions that will present themselves in a variety of texts. Now, you may wonder why one would even use this strategy at all, but let me tell you, first and foremost, it greatly improves your students' reading comprehension skills, without a doubt. It helps students think about the text that they are reading. It teaches students how to ask questions. And lastly, encourages students to think creatively and challenges them to use higher order thinking skills. In a moment, we'll discuss the four types of question-answer relationships. Welcome to episode 62 of the Teacher Rockstar podcast, a place where tips and strategies critical to the new teacher are discussed. I'm your host, Steve Hiles, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about teaching your students question-answer relationships. All right, let's dive right in. First of all, there are four types of questions that students will encounter that I want to talk about. The first one is right there questions, or right there QARs. Now, these are answers that are literally right there in the text. Let me give you an example. Now, the question might be, what color was the boy's bicycle? Well, when you refer back to the text, you find that the boy's bicycle was red. Well, that would be a right there question because the answer is literally right there. Making sense? Okay, next we come to think and search QARs. Now, you find the answers to think and search QARs by reading through various parts of the text or the chapter. I kind of refer to this as reading between the lines. It's been my experience that think and search QARs were difficult at first for my students because they were so used to seeing the answer pop right up there. But after lots of explicit instruction and practice, they eventually got better and better at it. Now this leads us to the next QAR, referred to as author and you. Now these kinds of answers are found in the text, however, the student must relate it to their own experiences. Now just to be clear, the answer does not appear directly in the text, so the student must have read the text in order to answer the question. In other words, the student, after reading the text, brings it back to his or her own life experience to answer the question. And lastly, the on my own QAR answers. It's important to note here that these types of answers do not require that the student read the passage at all. So therefore, the student must use their own background knowledge to answer that type of question. For example, if I were to ask you, what are some of your favorite sports? Well, you wouldn't need to read any particular passage or text to answer that question. You would simply state your personal preference. There's no right or wrong answer here. Now let's pause for a quick word from our sponsor. Would you like to supercharge your classroom management skills? Well, if you're a brand new teacher, a student teacher, perhaps you're a teacher returning back to the classroom, the Teacher Rockstar Academy course is just for you. Gain the confidence, the skills you'll need to crush it on day one and beyond. So invest in yourself and enroll now at teacherrockstaracademy.com. That's teacherrockstaracademy.com. I promise you that this will be a most transformational experience. Okay, let's continue. Now, after teaching my students the four different QARs, it was time to put this strategy into effect. When I first started teaching this concept to my students, I would start with a rather easy to read simple text and read it aloud to my students. I began with the right there question because it is the simplest of all. I would have a few already made up questions for the class. Then after reading the question, I would model how I got the right there answer. During each QAR session, I would introduce a new type of QAR. For example, think and search, author and you, or on your own. Here again, I would have pre-selected questions. I would read the text and model the strategy, after which I would show students how to find the information to answer that particular question. Now, I have used QAR with my students when reading social studies, science, and math information from their textbooks. This process works great for independent and group or partner work. As time went on, I would gradually increase the length and complexity of the reading assignments. The students would continue to use QAR through the school year. It wasn't just taught once as a lesson and forgotten about. There is so much more that can be said about QAR, and we just skimmed the surface here. But if you're interested in learning more about the QAR concept, I'd like to recommend a book that will get you up to speed about the process. It's called QAR Now, a powerful and practical framework that develops comprehension and higher order thinking in all students. The authors are Taffy E. Raphael, Kathy Highfield, and Catherine H. O. In conclusion, I recommend introducing QAR as early in the beginning of the year as you can. Obviously, the earlier the better, so that kids have enough time to enhance their comprehension skills. Also, it would be great to use QAR systematically as part of your day-to-day lessons. Now, keep in mind that QAR doesn't just apply to reading language arts lessons, but in social studies, science, and mathematics as well. Well, this brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you find a golden nugget or two that you can use. Feel free to reach out to me should you have any questions or comments. I'd love to hear from you. I want to thank you for listening to the Teacher Rockstar podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hiles. We hope you've enjoyed listening to these tips and strategies regarding teaching your students question-answer relationships. When you get a moment, visit my blog and subscribe to my newsletter for the latest educational research, best teaching practices, and unadvertised free bonuses. Go to stevesclassroomresources.blogspot.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us at the Teacher Rockstar podcast. And if you'd like to support us, please feel free to share our podcast with others. Post about it on social media. Leave a rating and review. That would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again. We'll see you same time, same place next week. And remember, my friend, you got this.